Welcome to 60 Minutes. I'm Ainsley Balls. Ladue, Missouri was a quiet, peaceful, upper-middle-class suburb of St. Louis in the 1950s. Quiet, that is, until a boy began terrorizing its citizens. Pursued by law enforcement but never apprehended, that boy turned 70 years old this week, still on the lam. 60 Minutes senior correspondent Morley Sapphire has the story.
Ladue was a sedate place until Steve Biggs, then only 10 years old, initiated his campaign of terror. The fear began here, Conway School, where Biggs was a solid student, liked by his classmates, even his teachers, until what came to be known as the Reba Turd Incident. Dr. Robert Oliveri was a Conway School principal decades after the Reba Turd was dumped, but he knew all about it.
Staff opened the school that Monday morning, and the place just reeked. A quick review showed that the kitchen had been broken into over the weekend, and there were 2 defilements.
2?
Yes, first of all the ice cream in the freezers were consumed, and there was a mess from their packaging all over the kitchen. And this was ice cream that we had purchased to reward the children that Friday. So children went unrewarded, thanks to Mr. Biggs.
Whoa.
Secondly, there was a huge turd left in our kitchen mixer, and it ripened all weekend. And so by the time we walked in on Monday, the stench had spread throughout the kitchen and throughout the rest of the school. It took us over a week to air out the school.
How did they know it was Biggs?
Well, they didn't at first, but you know, kids talk. And so the word on the playground became, Biggs pinched a Reba.
Reba?
Well, the kids had named the turd. It was so famous. But it took the staff until the end of the semester to be able to figure out that Biggs was involved. He, of course, declined it.
District administrators wouldn't let a 60 Minutes film crew into the school, but we were able to locate the kitchen window and verify that the same mixing bowl that served as Steve Biggs' personal commode is still in that kitchen. We then bribed a 5th grader with Pokemon cards and a Beyonce CD to secretly photograph the mixer. Well, how did they confirm it was Biggs' turd then?
Well, the principal then, Reba, was a wily old veteran, and she was suspicious of Biggs from the very beginning. So one day she followed him down to the boys' bathroom, and after he left, she went in, and he had taken a big dump that day too. And it was the undeniable fragrance of what had destroyed the school after this event.
Were there any lasting effects on the students at Conway School, Dr. Oliveri?
Well, yes. Pure terror. In fact, children today still won't eat anything made in the mixing bowl, so there's no longer mashed potatoes, muffins, or even cake served to the students at Conway School.
Today?
Yes.
2016, why?
Well, the Reba Turd incident has become school lore. It was passed down from one class to another. Even now, 60 years later, after Biggs dropped his stool at our school, Conway leads all St. Louis counties school districts in eating disorders by children.
Childhood eating disorders?
Correct.
Dr. Oliveri, if you had a chance to say something directly to Steve Biggs today, what would it be?
Well, I would say it in the form of a story. Even to this day, 60 years after this incident, in an afternoon when maybe an older male student goes down to use the restroom, comes back to class, if he's got a little grin on his face, the rest of the kids stop whatever they're doing in anticipation. And he will then enter the room and say, it was a Reba.
An unlikely home to produce a terrorist, and an unlikely school to nurture one. Biggs moved on to 7th grade at John Burroughs School an elite private institution that apparently allowed students to pursue their own interests. Now called Reba, named after his own turd, he constructed in shop class, incredibly enough with the help and encouragement of teachers, the instrument of his next terrorist enterprise, a motor scooter. Detective Frank Myers saw it all in 4 decades on the Ladue Police Department, but nothing like this case. Now retired, Myers joined the force as a young man and spent his entire career pursuing Reba.
The turd case was still open when I joined the force. Then we started getting calls about some kid on a motor scooter, tearing up gardens, destroying lawns, waking up people at 3 a.m.
He did all this on a homemade motor scooter?
That and more. I gotta hand it to the kid. He was a hell of a mechanic and rider. That baby was fast, and Reba was fearless, busting through hedges and whipping through narrow gaps in fencing that he probably made himself.
Well, how did you know it was Biggs?
By the wild Reba call. After he'd destroy a lawn, garden, or a night's sleep, he'd ride off yelling, "Reba! Reba! Reba!" Examining our files, we realized that the little terrorist was the Reba turd boy, Steve Biggs.
Well, once you had an identification, why couldn't you catch Biggs?
He never rode his bike on the streets where we had our squads. He'd stick to the lawns, narrow pathways, and little lanes. He was clever. Always chose a different route every night. But one night, he slipped up. Susan Sella, an upstanding citizen, got a photo of him in her garden.
So when you went to arrest him?
He disappeared. Vanished without a trace. The family was distraught.
But Biggs' older brother Jack tells a different story.
I'm standing in front of the house where the Biggs family resided for over 25 years at 811 South Warson Road in Ladue, Missouri, just west of St. Louis. A pretty upscale area, a very nice neighborhood. This is where Steve grew up and terrorized most of the neighborhood during his youth. This is before he suddenly disappeared and we don't know what happened to him. But he departed with the words, "I'm not going to do time." This is unusual because this was a great household headed by John and Dottie. I'm his older brother Jack, a perfect role model, and younger brother Arden, sister Arden, and brother Bob, who were great supporters, and Pausetta in the kitchen. So we just don't understand this. We were very upset after Steve left for about a day or so, and then we realized how much happier we were as a household when he was not here. I'd like to point out one important feature of this house that led somewhat to Steve's ability to get in and out undetected. And that was this drain pipe here at the front porch would run all the way up to the window. And this is how Steve would shinny out of the upstairs where he slept and go around. He's terrorizing the neighborhood in the middle of the night and return. He also entertained up through that drain pipe at certain women that would climb up, someone undetected. But then again, we don't know what happened to Steve, and this is the mystery that we all have had to live with for all of these years.
That was 56 years ago, but the Ladue police never stopped looking for him.
It's the one great embarrassment of my career that we could never catch the Reba turd and bring him to justice.
I feel for you, Detective Myers. Biggs must have had collaborators to disappear so completely at age 14.
Oh, he did all right. Adults who provided him with money, guidance, and spare parts. But they had such sophisticated code names that we could never break it.
Code names for collaborators? What were they?
Bob, and Fox.
Well, Ladue is finally quiet. But tomorrow, somewhere in this great nation, a domestic terrorist named Reba will celebrate his 70th birthday with a tumbler of bourbon and a derisive laugh at the Ladue police.